Hi, I'm Michelle Chalfant, psychotherapist, holistic life coach, and human just like you, learning to navigate life's challenges. With over 25 years experience, I teach people how to get healthy using the adult chair model. The adult chair model is where simple psychology meets grounded spirituality, and it teaches us how to become healthy adults. From anxiety and depression to codependency and relationship issues, you can use the adult chair for just about anything. Each week, I share practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and a wide range of experts on how to get unstuck, how to live authentically, and how to truly love yourself, all while sitting in your adult chair. Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. All right, everybody. So here we are with my two very special ladies, Erica and Sharon. I just want to welcome you both to the Adult Chair Podcast. And I just want to say thank you in advance. This is going to be a very, very special show because grief is something that touches everyone's heart. I don't think there's anyone on the planet that has not experienced grief. Would you two agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
It's truly an emotion that just like, happiness, sadness, there's grief. And I think that our world really needs to have a deeper understanding of what this is and what we do with it. So thank you both, first of all, for the work that you do and for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
So exciting.
I know. So, okay. Who would like to go first? Because I'd like to hear both of your stories, honestly. So who would like to go first?
So I'll go first.
Sharon.
So,
All right.
Yeah, I'm Sharon. In 2006, I was sitting in a real estate open house and I got a call from my daughter, 17 years old at the time, that she had lost Austin. Austin was my 10-year-old nephew. All of my brother-in-law, Lewis, and my brother decided they were going to take a trip with the kids for Father's Day weekend and go to the lake. And when she said she lost him, the fear that came through the phone was so loud. It almost like it jumped out and slapped me. Like I literally lost, my knees went weak and I fell to the ground. But something in my voice told me to be strong. And I was really trying to be strong for her. And she just started crying and saying, Mom, there's something wrong. She knew, but she was trying to have me figure it out for myself. 3 hours after that initial phone call, I had to go to my sister's house and tell her that Austin had drowned right there by the lake and right where the boats were. And as I was walking up the stairs, I remember thinking to myself, I don't know how to grieve. I didn't know anything about grieving. The one thing I knew is that there were these bereavement groups at the hospital where old people went. That was the extent of what I knew about grief. And when I knocked on the door and Erica opened the door, she already had known by this point that Austin was missing. These two big eyes just looked back at me and her face was like, please give me some good news. And I was like, honey, I'm so sorry. He drowned. And that started our journey. And that was in 2006.
Gosh. Yeah, it's crazy when we go over this back and forth quite a bit. And what I remember in that moment was her saying they found him and then right after that he drowned. So it's like I had a half a second like, oh, relief, he's been found. And then my brain caught up and processed what she said. And it was, we stumbled and tripped over ourselves for a good solid 8 months. We traveled collectively as a group, as a family, there's 5 of us siblings, and we kind of made it a point to try to be together every single day after that. And thankfully, after trial and error, like I said, we stumbled. Sharon sent me to a few traditional bereavement groups, and they were terrible. On the last time I left and I called her and I said, please stop helping me. It was killing me. Because it's sad to go to those groups and to sit there with people who just kind of get stuck in their stories. And they had a gentleman in there for 15 years and I didn't want to be that. I just said, I'm going to accept that this is my life. I'm a mother who's lost a child. I'm going to be sad for the rest of my life. And that's going to be it. And we found this program and had such an amazing experience in it that she and I decided to become certified. and we haven't stopped trying to heal hearts as much as we can.
Mm.
And, I wish my story ended there and that we were going to have this success journey, the great comeback, right? We got recertified in 2015. And 2 days after that, my oldest son, Donovan, was killed in a motorcycle accident.
Oh.
So it was like our family had been struck by lightning twice. And we were beyond devastated, beyond heartbroken. My experience with grief, naively, I thought was going to be the same. It was completely different. Austin was 10, so I was very much, brush your teeth and take your bath and do all of that. Donovan was 2 weeks short of his 21st birthday, so we had like an adult relationship. I didn't have to chase him around, telling him to do things, which I still did. And we talked on the phone, we text every day. So I wasn't only grieving a child, I was grieving my friend. So the grief hit me twice as hard. I was super resistant to going through the process. I lied about how I was doing and basically isolated myself in the house for almost a year, which was easy to do because Sharon was in California, so she couldn't see me. We were just on the phone, and it's easy to pass off lies when you're on the phone.
Sure.
And my husband travels for work. He's gone Monday through Friday. So I was in here basically dying on the inside every single day.
Oh my God.
And I went down a very dark path. And like I said, about that 1 year mark, I had a breakdown, and Sharon flew out here, and I knew I had to make a decision. It was either get to work on healing or I was going to be lost. I was going to be lost forever. And I thankfully made the choice to work on healing. And here we are. It's almost 6 years. Donovan, July is his anniversary.
Oh, I'm already like, hold it back, Michelle. I'm like, keep looking at my Kleenex. I'm like, do not start crying. And I'm looking at you two who are like these solid women. And I'm like, I'm going to be the one crying. I am just like, I honestly, like, I don't have words. Like, I'm sure you went through this. How can this happen to me twice? Like, oh my God, I just can't even. I want to go into what is grief? Can you just define grief?
So the definition of grief is this. This is what we call the true definition of grief. Grief is normal.
Yeah.
Grief is natural. Grief is the process that our body goes through after experienced a loss of any kind.
Yeah.
But here's the part that where we mess up as a society. We don't understand that there are 43 or more known losses that a person can grieve. We put it on death and divorce.
Yeah.
But what happens when your fur baby dies? That's a grieving experience.
Yeah.
Financial changes, adding a new family member, miscarriage, infertility, marital problems, becoming an empty nester. So here's the other thing that happens. We have all of these things that we experience through our life. They are cause grieving experiences. None of us, unfortunately, know how to grieve properly.
Nope.
And so it just builds and builds and builds. And so you opened the show and said, we all experience grief. But the truth is, we're not getting out of here without experiencing multiple grieving experiences.
Yeah.
And then what do we do with them?
And you know what? I just did a video on this for my social media. And I said, and I'd like your opinion on this, both of you. What I said, I was sharing with everybody what a difficult time I was having, because I have one son that's in school in England. He's getting his graduate degree, and he had come home. I hadn't seen him since September, and he came home for 2 weeks, and then he just left. And at the same time, my other son that lived in Chattanooga came home for a week, and then he left on the same day to go move to Washington State. So I'm like, one's 4,000 miles away and one is almost 3,000 miles away. And I was in grief. And what I said, and I still am. I mean, I still am, honestly. And it's what I said to everybody on the video. I said, I'm experiencing grief, but there's a difference between experiencing grief and processing our grief.
Yeah.
Would you guys talk? This is what I was talking about. I'd like to hear your take on this, because grief is that thing that hits us when we hear, oh my God, my son has died, or again, empty nester, whatever it might be. It's that thing that hits us on the inside. It's an emotion. And then we don't know what to do. And that's the process. That's the manual that we need, is how do we work the grief? What do we do? So can you guys talk about that a little bit?
Well, and I would say first off, the part of processing is really allowing the feelings in, because
Yes.
so often, and this is what I did when after Donovan died, I completely resisted. I pushed the emotions away. I wouldn't allow them in. The only one I would allow in was anger. So I was
Yeah.
mad at the world and I was mad all the time.
Yeah.
But to really process the grief, you got to allow the emotions in so that they can kind of essentially pass through you. And
Mhm.
then you get a little bit of the steam let off because you have to acknowledge what it is
Yeah.
also that's there.
Yeah.
So it's like allowing it in and say, okay, what is this? What does this feel like? And when you make the connection between the emotion that you're actually feeling and you call it by its name, it's
Mhm.
like two puzzle pieces that go together and they fit. And then you go, okay, I'm really, really sad. All right, now what am I going to do about it? And you got to
Mhm.
find your safe space to where you could then take your processing to another level and talk it through.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with these feelings? How are they going to impact me moving forward? And how often and how long am I going to feel like this? Which everyone is different. So it's just being open to knowing it's not just one day, you're going to process and then bam, you're cured and you move on with your life. Everyone moves at a different pace.
That's another thing that I talked about. We're
Mm.
all different. We cannot compare ourselves to
Right.
anybody else. We cannot say that, this happened to me. It only lasted a week that I was grieving and then I was done. So there must be something wrong with me because now it's been 6 months and I'm still grieving. I love that you said that because I think that as humans, we do that. We compare ourselves constantly.
Completely.
And then we question, like, what's wrong with me that I'm still in this? But one thing and I love that you said it's about feeling the emotions. We talk about that in the adult chair all the time. We cannot block emotions,
Right.
and we do that. But the quote on, I don't think any emotions are negative, but our ego labels them as good and bad. So I'll say it's a negative emotion, grief. Um, the bad ones we don't want to feel. But now anger's okay.
Yeah.
I can throw things around the room, but to feel grief, tell us about what's your opinion on why we get stuck in grief? What happens?
I I think the main reason that we get stuck in grief is because nobody knows how to do it.
Right.
I think the main reason no one knows how to do it is because we don't talk about it.
Yep.
My first grieving experience, major grieving experience, was a loss of a very close aunt when I say 14, but Eric and I are 10 years apart. So she says, no, I was 6. So
Mhm.
16 years old. My aunt passed away, loved her, loved my family. We're extremely close. My parents went to help my uncle. He was gone. Both of my parents were gone for almost 2 weeks. They never came home and said, your aunt has died. Let's sit down and talk about what grief is. What is this going to feel like for you? Your heart is going to feel sad. You're going to feel like you don't want to eat. You may feel like all you want to do is play with your friends. And all of those things are okay. Now, I'm not blaming my parents because they don't know how to grieve.
They didn't
To
know.
this day, they didn't know.
Mhm.
And guess what? Their parents didn't know either. But
Mhm.
we're a different society now. Now we have to teach. So we have to teach our children how to grieve. So here's what happened. We get stuck because just like you guys were talking about processing, we don't know how to process. And
Right.
processing is very, very simple.
Yeah.
What if I just sat and cried it out? What if I did get angry and throw the laundry that she wasn't doing around? She kept telling, every time I called her, she said she was doing laundry. What if I really got mad and really got in there and said, I'm mad as hell? What? And the supporting people around her accepted that. But that's not what we do. We say things like, okay, sister, you be strong.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Don't
Honey,
be
you
strong.
just
Yeah.
give it time. You just give it time. You're going to feel better in time. I could have left Erica with grieving Donovan. And I'm telling you right now, 6 years later, she'd still be in the same spot or
Oh, yeah.
worse
Yep.
if left alone. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
get stuck because we don't know what to do. And we
Yeah.
get stuck because intellectually we try to figure it out.
And
Right.
you cannot process grief just with your mind. It's a full-bodied experience.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think something else that happens is we don't call grief by its name.
Yeah.
We call it, oh, she's depressed.
Yeah.
Oh, it's PTSD. Like there's all these words is, oh, she's got anxiety. We don't call it by its name. I don't know why we hate to say the word, but even when there's something tragic like a mass shooting and you hear the news commentators, they don't say the word grief. It's weird to me.
That is weird. And I would agree with you now that I think on that, like they don't.
Mm-mm.
We just hired a new marketing team, and their suggestion was that we drop the word grief.
It's
What?
too sad.
We're grief specialists.
What?
Yeah. And they were like, well, maybe you shouldn't use the word grief so much. And I get where they were going, but could you imagine?
No.
You know, we're going to be the ones not using the word.
You need to use that word.
Because our one goal is to change the world in the conversation of grief.
Thank you
wanna
for doing your
normalize
work.
talking
God.
about it.
Yeah.
It should be normalized. It's just an emotion, not to make light of your situation, but it's an emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to feel anything, let alone grief. So tell me about how we grieve. Talk to all of us about how, like, what are some things that might happen? Now, you said you might want to throw the laundry, you might be angry. Is there anything else? Like, what's the process? You know, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, of course, she's got her stages of grief, but what would you two say about if someone is experiencing grief, what are some steps? What are some things they can do to move it along, to really help
Sadly,
process?
the greatest piece of information that I got the very first class day was that the 5 stages of grief do not apply to grievers. And that actually was so relieving because I thought I had been grieving wrong. Sharon and I got on the phone every day, and that's what we knew. We knew the stages. So she would call me and she would say, well, what stage are you in today? And I was literally forcing myself to come up with something because I was like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. And then one day I threw out there, I'm like, maybe I'm in denial. And she goes, Austin died, right? And I'm like, yeah, stupid. I know he died. Like, in our very sisterly way. But I didn't know what else to do because I'm like, these stages don't fit, especially bargaining. Who was I going to bargain with?
Yeah.
So when the facilitator said that, and I looked at her, like she immediately had my full attention. Because honestly, I went to that class out of obligation to Sharon's church because she lied and told me that the church paid for it to trick me to get there.
Big sister love.
So I said, thank God, because I thought I'd been grieving wrong. So think about it this way. The stages of grief were designed for people who were actively dying.
Oh,
It makes
wow.
so much more sense when you see it from that way. You have
I love
denial,
that.
you have bargaining, you have anger, you have depression, and then you finally get to acceptance. Totally makes sense.
That does make sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And we have seen that in real time with our dad. Our dad died of cancer, and so we saw that in real time, and it totally clicks.
Oh, wow.
So when you take the stages away, there are like so many ways people can grieve, but one of the things that we know them to do first off is to try to avoid the feelings.
Yeah.
They want to avoid it because grief is so overwhelming. It's completely debilitating. It affects every area of your life, every single relationship you have. So who wants that, right? Nobody. So what
Right.
do? I'm going to have this glass of wine, or I'm going to take this Xanax because that's like the magic grief pill that everybody's getting when they go to their doctor. Or I'm going to just binge watch these TV shows and I'm not even going to acknowledge that I'm sad because I can zone out on the TV. That's one of the first things people will do. But of course, that only lasts for so long.
Mhm.
And then you get to the point where you do hit your rock bottom. And then you say, okay, I have to do something. So then from that point, it could look like a number of things. It could be talk therapy. Hopefully they find us, or, some sort of other support group that, is kind of helping to move them along.
So 2 things I want to ask you about. Number 1, people that don't grieve. We have people that shove emotions down, all emotions, let's face it. But grief is such a heavy emotion. There are people that I personally know that have just really never grieved.
Yeah.
What do you see in your years of doing this that happens with people when they don't grieve?
So Erica talks about this all the time. Grief is going to find a way.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
going to find a way out. There is no avoiding it. We have to go through it, right? But
Mhm.
if you don't go through it and you try going around it or over it, it's going to find a way out. And it comes out in addiction to food, addiction to alcohol, addiction to drugs, hyper focus on something that has nothing to do with your grief,
Yeah.
unable to maintain relationships. We have met with people that come to us to grieve, their little fur baby, and we're totally working on it. Turns out they haven't spoke to their dad in 30 years because he had an affair with mom. And we're talking to her and I'm like, well, what about your dad? She's like, oh, I hate him. I don't talk to him. Yeah. But she came to a cat. So it's going to come out some way. You can't hold down a job. And we're all looking for this happiness to get in when I get happy. But a lot of times what's keeping us from being happy is our broken heart. It's all of the things that are broken inside of us that are there. We see it come out in illness.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. A lot of people I know, not a lot, excuse me, some people that I know have had, breast cancer, different things like that manifest. And again, God only knows, is it a direct link? I don't know.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is when they do start going to therapy or coaching and they find out if they have some sort of cancer or a heart attack or some manifestation of an illness, guess what they found out? That they never grieved such and such, whatever it might have been, you know? Fascinating, because the physical body might carry that grief around, but like you said, it's got to come out somewhere.
Oh yeah.
And it's an unhealthy thing to really carry. We need to process this. I remember when my father died with my sister and we went, and of course at the funeral, I remember when they wheeled him down in the church and the casket came down, I remember the night before at the wake, and I was like, this is like a rehearsal dinner. This is a blast. I hadn't seen these people in, so many years. It was so fun. But then the day of the funeral, here he comes down the aisle in the church, and I started crying. I could not stop crying for 7 days. I don't know what it was. I don't know what was magical about 7 days, all day, all night. And I'm with my husband, my sister, her husband, my cousin. My sister was crying, of course, but not like I was. And I was like, what's wrong with me? I was judging myself. Like I could not stop crying. 7th day, it was like, okay, we're done. But my sister cried differently. And what I realized when I reflected back on that is we both had it right. It wasn't that my sister still cries to this day. I don't as much. And it's been 20 years. But it's interesting. And I just really want to point out, nobody has the specific way of grieving. It's all different. Everyone's on their own timeline and nobody has it right or wrong, just as long as you're doing it. Correct?
Absolutely. 100%. And I think that was key for Lewis and I, because that's, I think, a big mistake that couples who lose a child.
Oh, yeah.
They expect that they're both going to grieve the same. But the truth about it is we all have different relationships with the people in our lives. I'm the mom. I kissed the boo-boos.
Yep.
I made the lunches. He's the Superman dad. He got the boogeyman out of the closet and he fixed the bikes. Our relationships are different. So how are we expecting that we're going to grieve 100% the same? It's not possible.
So true.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yeah, go Sharon.
So one of the things is that it's really important, and this was huge for me, and no judgment on you, but we have grievers that don't cry at all. Or we have grievers that come to us and say, but I cried already, thinking that was the actual grieving.
Yes.
Crying is just crying.
Yes, right? I agree.
So our tears are an outward sign of our love for the person or our hate for the person, because we can grieve somebody we don't like, right? We can grieve a relationship that's very difficult. So tears just are. And don't be surprised if tears don't come when you're grieving. There's no judgment on you. Yeah. Also, what Erica was just talking about, I want to piggyback on that. Our father passed away 8 years ago. And 3 days before he died, all of us children, there were 5 of us, were all standing around his bed and we were all talking to him. And we were each losing a different dad. Oh, think about this.
So
just
true.
Erica and I.
Yeah.
I was the oldest child. I did all of his medical care. My parents lived very close. I went over there almost every day. Um, he expected me as the oldest daughter to get things done. He would call me really sharp, Sharon, and like, you got to do this. Erica was the baby and the apple of his eye and could do no wrong. And everything she did was perfect. Even her children were that way to him. It was so funny. Like her boys, Donovan and Austin, were like just there for him. So even though we stood at the foot of his bed and we all loved him, we were all losing a different dad. Mm-hmm. I couldn't look at Erica. I cannot understand what she was going through. She was losing her, the daddy's girl dad. I was losing the tough guy. And so our relationships are different. And that's why we should not ever compare our loss to someone else's.
Such a good point. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned this earlier. I think, Erica, you were saying you were in some sort of grief group or process group.
Yes.
I don't want to offend anyone listening to this because I'm sure there are some very good groups out there, but I've worked with a lot of people that have been in grief groups, cancer groups, different kinds of groups. I'm not, hear me now, just for my audience, I'm not saying don't go. I am saying this. If you're not benefiting from it, or it doesn't feel like it's serving you, get out. I have people that will say to me, they just sit around kind of like you said. I want you to talk a little bit about what would be a healthy process group versus a process group that's keeping you stuck.
Right. So the difference is we have groups where people show up every week, right? Mm-hmm. One night a week or whatever. And you just tell your story. There's no action steps. Yeah. There's no process of really your emotions. It's just your story. So, and the people that facilitate those groups haven't really experienced any losses of their own or none of significance where they can share their expertise or, some steps on how they got to a resolve. And that's why, they want to do that type of work, right? Yeah. Sometimes it's kind of like, especially like Sharon said, the ones at the hospital, it's kind of by default, like, okay, who drew the short straw? Okay, you're running the grief group. You know what I mean? The difference is to find a group where there's action, where you have to really go through the emotions and there's steps to get you from point A to point B. Yes. Because like we say, and Sharon says this all the time, grief has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It really does.
I love that.
Not just out there floundering. Yeah. So you need to be in a group that's going to get you to the end.
I love that. Thank you. Because sometimes they become quote unquote, excuse my French, but like a bitch circle.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about one of my clients that had cancer, and she said, I leave that group and I feel worse than when I went in, and I'm like, why are you still going? Well, because it's a breast cancer, group. I'm like, stop going, please. Like, it's not helping you. She says, yeah, everyone just talks about how terrible their cancer is. I'm like, that's not a healthy group. Same with grief. I've had, unfortunately, a few friends that have lost their children to cancer, to drowning, and same thing, like unhealthy groups. There are a lot of unhealthy groups. So I just want everyone to hear this, like really check in with yourself and ask yourself, is this helping me? Right. Am I moving through it or not? Yes, Sharon.
So one of the things we know to be true is that grievers need to talk. Yeah. They're dying to talk and tell their story, right? So when we think of that, immediately after the loss, the brain and the heart are not on the same page. The heart's broken, but the brain is doing what it normally does, and it's trying to figure out a way to protect you, right? So the heart and the brain are not on the same page. Something happens to the griever when they say it out loud. And most times they can't say the thing out loud. Mm-hmm. So yes. Erica said the accident, was referring to Donovan for almost a year. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The accident. She didn't say Donovan died. She just referred to the accident. Grievers need to talk. They're dying to talk. And that's part of the grief is natural. We were meant to talk it out so that our brains and hearts can line up. Where the heck was I going with this? So that's why the grief groups work, because we get in there and we get a chance to say it. But then after you've vomited it out time and time again, Where do you go with it? What do you do with it?
Yeah.
But equally as important as them talking is someone listening to them and really
Yes.
hearing it out and understanding it, right? And really hearing it out. And not like we're in a group. We had a couple that lost a child, and they were in a grief group, and they went in 1 week. The assignment was they were going to do a memorial candle.
Oh.
And she came to me and she was like, I don't want to make a candle. I don't want a memorial candle. Like, that's not the action steps we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about actually digging down in there. Yeah, the candle's probably great for a lot of people. There's also a lot of spiritual support groups. No, not talking bad to anyone, but you cannot attend if your person you've lost was LGBTQ. You can't attend if you're going through a divorce. You cannot attend if there's a fur baby. Yes, ma'am. And so
That's
grief
terrible.
is grief is grief.
There are groups that will turn you away.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. I'm going to really try hard not to get on my soapbox right now. Okay. So let me take a deep breath. Let me grieve that.
Yeah.
Let me just process that anger that's coming up right now.
Yeah.
That makes me so angry to discriminate against people when they're grieving. Grief is grief is grief. Come on, people. Okay. Hold on. I got to take a deep breath. Makes me so mad. Okay.
Well, and the other thing, the groups that are run through the church, which, thankfully there's a place, but you can't pray your grief away either.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
And sometimes, like for me, not with Austin, because I felt like I handled Austin's death so graciously. Like I was like, okay, these things happen. We're going to get our lives together and it's fine. Donovan died. I was like, oh, heck no.
Yeah.
God, you and I,
Yeah.
you have some explaining to do. And I was mad at God.
Yeah, I'm sure.
People who question their faith.
Oh,
So having a faith-based grief group and advising them to lean on God, that's almost like, telling them to go talk to the person that they're like in a fight with, right? And so it doesn't work. So that's another thing to know. Like you got to be open at accepting people where they are and not trying to cram, certain things down their throat if that's not what they're ready for. And sometimes people are scared to say they're mad at God because people will judge them. So they hold it in.
Well, and I think they're also afraid that God may judge them.
Right. Absolutely.
But that's a whole other tangent we don't need to go down right now because I could go down there.
This is going to be a 3-parter. I can tell already.
The whole month of June, we're talking about grief and because, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I want to talk about this. This comes up quite a bit too. I have people that ask me this question, and this is what I advise, but I think you guys might expand on this. When people say, what do I say to my friend who lost their fill in the blank, whose child left for college? What I suggest is, from the adult chair, I'm like, being your adult, just listen. That's it. People want to be heard. Like they just want to be able to get it out without hearing us say things like, time heals all wounds. Life will get better. But I don't mean to say that in a judgy way at all, because as human beings, I don't think we know what to say. It is uncomfortable for the receiver of someone that's experiencing grief. But can you expand on that? Like, how do we show up other than with presence and listening? Is there anything that someone can say or do for a person that is experiencing grief?
Yes.
Go, Sharon.
Go. All
right. Erica, one of you.
So one of the things is that, and you said it earlier, but a lot of times if I'm typing on social media, I just say there are no words.
Yep.
There are no words. What could I say that would make you feel better? There are no words.
Yeah.
If I were near you, my friend, I would give you a hug.
Yep.
Don't try to fix them. They are not broken.
Nope.
Their heart has a crack in it.
Yep.
They're not broken.
Nope.
Honestly, the most powerful thing you could do is just sit with the griever.
Yep.
Just put your hand on their shoulder and just sit with them as they cry.
Yeah.
I have no idea what this feels like for you. My heart is breaking for you right now. All of those are things you can say.
Right.
Which is, by the way, telling the truth about how we feel. Like that's what I said to you two when we started before we hit record. I said, here's my Kleenex. I don't even know what to say. I think I'm just going to say, I'm sorry, because I really don't know what to say, because it's like, wow. And it's just being honest, but being present.
Yes.
So thank you. I think that's going to help a lot of people.
And one of the things, one of the most disrespectful things you can say to a griever is, I know how you feel. That's impossible.
Nobody
to know how
knows.
someone else feels.
Right.
Exactly. So people need to not say that, because then what they do with the follow-up to that is divert back to themselves. So, oh, I'm so sorry, Michelle, but I know how you feel. My grandma just died. That's not the same.
No.
Also, Michelle, when you meet the people that are still talking about their grief 5 and 10 years later, it's because the grief is still there. And they didn't get this chance to really share it. They didn't get this chance to really talk about it, because quickly we also notice, just as much as we don't know what to say, we also don't want to talk about it or hear about it.
Yes.
And so our friends will come up and say, I lost my nephew. And, oh, I'm so sorry for that. Did you see the Dodger game on Wednesday? They really run. We changed that subject because we're letting them
uncomfortable. We're uncomfortable. We don't know what to do, so we shut it down.
Yeah.
So true. But I want to expand on that a little bit. This has been my experience. When people stay stuck in their story, I call it story and assumption, with their grief, it also keeps them stuck. For example, if I were to say, my dad, now that he's gone, my kids will never know their grandfather, and I'm never gonna, know my, have my dad when I get older. And, he used to own an insurance agency, and I need help with insurance, and I'll never know how to do it. It's like, we also can keep ourselves stuck by being stuck in story. And it's like excruciating for us. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that, I've even done that with myself when I found myself doing that with my kids for like just a few minutes. And then I busted out of it, but it was like, oh, my son's moving to Washington. He'll never want to live here again. He feels his energy. He feels like he belongs out West. I'm so sad. So there's grieving that. But if I continue to tell myself that story, I'm going to start looping and find myself stuck in this story in 5-10 years. So there's a difference between healthy grief and getting stuck in the mind in this story and assumption. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Erica.
Sorry, I lost it for a little bit. So I missed the last little thing. I apologize for my internet.
It's okay. It's storming there.
True. Okay. So true healing from the grief is possible.
Yeah.
But what happens as a society is that we say you'll never get over that.
Yes.
Do you know how many times Erica's heard you never get over the loss of a child?
Yep.
You never get over it. And she was asking about, Erica, about getting stuck in the story, or just hearing you say the thing over and over again. Oh, my son has gone away. I'm never going to move on. Like really getting stuck. I think and that's what I wrote down, is true healing is absolutely possible. And that's because we have to go after it. Yeah. But we have to acknowledge it. It goes back to the beginning of what Erica said in the beginning. Yep. We have to acknowledge that it's grief, and we have to be willing to go after it. And yes, what the experience feels like, it feels like someone took a knife and stabbed you clear through your soul.
Yes.
But now you have this imaginary knife and it's sticking out. If we don't take care of that knife, every time someone mentions it or talks about it, it's as if the knife is getting moved. We can move our own knife by choosing to stay there. Do you know we make the choice to stay stuck?
Yes, I do know that. But please, so I'm not the only one preaching this. Can you please tell everybody here? Yes, talk about that, Sharon.
I think we stay stuck out of fear. That's my own personal opinion. When we went to the grief program together, and the teacher was explaining to us, you're going to have more of Austin. You're going to have him. You'll be able to look at pictures of him, and you will smile when you look at those pictures. I thought she was a kook. And I was like, there's no way. And here was one thing that I thought: if you take this knife out of my heart, then I won't be able to sense him anymore. I won't be able to feel him, because what happens to that pain? It becomes our friend. It becomes our replacement.
Mhm.
I need this pain and I need this sad story to keep me going on. I need this story.
Yeah.
Unlike, and I will also share
And
this.
let's just, oh,
I would real quick, Erica, is this the story getting stuck in the story and then not being able to figure out how to get out of the spin?
Yeah, you're in a loop. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't get out.
So
Yep.
Erica was in a loop when Donovan died,
Yeah.
and she just couldn't figure out how to get out of the spin. She knew the tools, she just couldn't figure it out. But we have coined the term grief queen.
Ooh.
And king or queen, they put on the crown of glory and they choose to stay there.
Yeah.
They're choosing to stay there
Yeah.
because being a griever is, you get a lot of attention.
Yes.
People were writing, walking up to Erica and Lewis and writing them checks, and people were bringing food and they were bringing money and they were doing all of these things. It's a lot of attention that happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you able to get someone out of the loop? And it sounds like you, thank God for you, Sharon, with Erica, but Erica, when you were in that loop for a year,
yeah.
what do you think that Sharon could have gotten you out within that year, or how did the loop end?
Well,
how would you get, what happened?
If I were telling my truth, absolutely, she could have. But she had no idea because I was doing the Academy Award winning acting. I mean, I deserve an Oscar for my performance.
Here you are.
And and the thing that actually really got me to say, okay, I got to do something, was Lewis, because he said, I have to go to work every day. I'm trying to figure this out. I need you. You cannot fall apart.
Yeah.
And in that moment when he said that, I felt betrayed by him because I thought, no, we're in this together. We're both miserable. Like, we both lost these kids. You're supposed to stay with me and be sad. And when I realized he was trying to figure it out and pick up the pieces for himself, I was like, okay, I'm at this crossroads. Either I could keep going down this dark path and literally losing myself to this grief, or I could start figuring it out. And it was then that I did tell the truth about where I was at. And on Donovan's Facebook page, though, I didn't even call Sharon and have a conversation. I did a tribute on his Facebook for the 1 year anniversary. And she called me the next day and she said, why didn't you tell me? Because one of the things I said to him, I said, I'm such a fraud. I can't even help people because I can't even help myself.
Oh, wow.
And she said, why didn't you tell me? I said, I didn't want you to know. I didn't want anyone to know how bad. You know, that my fear was that if I opened the door to that sadness, it was so dark and so deep, I felt I was going to drown in it. And so that's why I kept trying to push it off and push it away. Yeah. And, you know, it didn't happen overnight, but the weekend she came, I mean, I definitely got started and it definitely got me on the right track. And I'm so thankful because I'm not a grief queen. I don't like to live in misery. I'm a clown. I like to be lighthearted and do silly things. So, I'll never be who I was before I lost my voice, but I'm as close as I'm going to get. And I'm still living my best life as much as possible.
So when you got out of that loop, Erica, again, I know that everyone is different and unique on their journey, but how long did it take you to kind of move into a little bit more, I don't even have the right word, balance, or what's the word?
So Donovan's 1 year was July 2nd. And I want to say in September, we went to my father-in-law's 80th birthday. And Sharon said, I could see some light back in your eyes. And that was when I finally realized that I was starting to live again.
So what do you say to people that are afraid of exactly what you said? Like, if I open this door to grief, I will get swallowed up and eaten alive by the sadness that I have within me. What do you say to those? Say that's
a perfectly valid concern.
Yeah.
But you won't get swallowed by it if you're willing to do the work. Now, you absolutely can be swallowed by it if you just like you want to be stuck, you know, you can. But if you're willing to do the work, we are going to hold your hand and make sure you don't get swallowed by it. And we're going to walk this journey with you every step of the way, and you will not be left alone.
Yeah, because people will say, if I open that up and I start crying, I will never stop crying. And the truth is, we will stop crying.
Yes.
We do.
At most, you can carry it on, I would say, for a solid 15 minutes, but then
Yeah.
you're like, you run out of tears and you you
Yes,
get worn out.
exactly. Except for me, I was 7 days.
Yeah.
I was 7 days straight. What do you, and you brought up a great point, and I can't tell you, I've been doing my work for maybe almost 30 years now. I have so many adult clients. I don't ever see kids, but adults that come to me and say, when my father died, like you were saying, Sharon, no one ever told me anything about what had happened. He just died. Or my uncle or my grandparent, or when my parents got divorced, we never talked about it again. My mother wouldn't allow me to talk about my dad in the house. I got in trouble. So all of these things for a child, I really want to talk about kids for a second that are in the household where there's grief happening.
Yeah.
And yet nobody's talking about it. Grandma died, the dog died, whatever it might be. Talk about, what do we say to our kids? And people always ask me questions like, what's appropriate? What's age appropriate? My child is 5, my child is 10, my child is 15. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, number one, tell the truth.
Yes. Regardless of age.
Regardless of age.
Yep.
Jordan was 3, and Erica will share a little bit about Jordan when he was 3 when Austin died, and a little bit about how that went. We tell the truth, and you use the word death, died, or
Yep.
divorce.
Yep.
Don't say Johnny has gone to be with Jesus.
With God. Yeah.
Johnny has gone to be with God. Johnny's in heaven. Johnny's in a happier place. It sounds to a 3-year-old like heaven is a place we can go and get him back from.
Yep.
We always tell the truth.
Yep.
We tell as much as age appropriateness as you think they can handle. I have some really bad news to tell you. Austin drowned. That means Austin is dead. And then just shut your mouth, because our little hearts, these little feet, they're going to ask you questions, and they're going to ask you the questions to the parts that they need to know. If you just say that, that's the number one thing. Don't make promises you cannot keep. I promise I won't leave you too. Mommy promises she will always be here.
Yes.
Because
Nothing will ever happen to mommy. Don't
Mommy
worry.
will-
Daddy
yes.
died. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Mommy will always be here. That's not true.
Mommy and daddy are getting a divorce, and we're going to be your best friends, and we're going to be together. And then guess what? Mommy and daddy start fighting. And then the next thing you know, little Johnny's in the middle. So all of those things, we tell the truth.
Yeah.
We use the words. Now, they don't know feelings because we haven't talked to them in feelings. So it is equally as important that you speak to them in feeling words. I have some really bad news to tell you. This is breaking my heart. My heart is really sad. Sad, mad, glad, afraid, and embarrassed. Really easy ones.
Yeah.
Angry. Very easy, very simple. This is really sad for me. I cried today. Now, as time goes on, little Johnny's not going to be sharing with you what's going on, because he's going to walk home from school and you're going to say, "How was your day?" And he's going to tell you the number one lie they all do: it was fine.
Fine.
Because
Yeah.
he doesn't talk that way. So in turn, now I need to start talking about Austin to my other children. I remember that time I stopped at Uncle Lou's and Austin was locking up the boat. And he was telling me how mature he was. And it was so cute. And I really missed those days when I would sit there and listen to Austin talk. It really makes me sad when I think about him. And again, you just zip it, because they're going to start telling their stories. And the next thing you know, you're talking about Austin and you're talking about him in real time. And because you've put emotional words to it, he's going to start putting emotional words to it.
I love that. Anything you want to add to that, Erica? That was beautiful, Sharon. Thank you.
You need to let them see you cry. A lot of parents are afraid. They don't want to cry in front of their kids. And well-intentioned folks will advise you not to cry in front of your children, but that's the worst thing.
I agree with
They're
you.
they're looking to you for, what do I do? What do I do with this now?
Mm-hmm.
So when Austin died, it was natural. And I'm so glad I did this with Donovan. Donovan was 12 at the time, and he was there when his brother drowned. I was not there. So for me, I wanted him to know that some days we're going to cry. Some days I'm going to cry. Some days I'm going to be mad. Some days I'm not going to know what I feel. but it's all okay. And some days you're going to cry, and some days we're going to be okay, and we might laugh. And that's
Mhm.
okay, because
Yeah.
we are still here. We're still going on with our lives, and we have to figure this out. So just letting them know that the full range of emotions that change, sometimes hour by hour, sometimes day by day, it's normal. It's all part of it. And
Yeah.
we're all going to do it at different times, sometimes the same time, but it's all okay.
Also, really important when you have really littles, right? And like Jordan was 3 when Austin died. They may not grieve right there and then, but because we kept Austin so alive, it wasn't uncommon and Jordan to actually experience this, grieving Jordan at 5, 6, 7, because that's
Mm.
really when they start to understand it. So you'll have the ones that grow up in the shadow of that brother that passed away. And because we all talk about it and the pictures are all hanging over the house, their grief might not happen because the absence of a brother, the absence of a father is a true grieving experience that
Yes.
happens in our heart.
Yes.
Mm.
And then we have a situation with those young folks and that Sharon and we did a series on, but they're technically being raised in grief
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
by everyone around them.
And it's healthy.
Yes.
Could be. It depends.
Yeah. Well, again, if we're stuck in story, no, but it's okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. If we're stuck in story about all the negatives, but I like how you sort of, it sounds like you really kept his spirit alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful. I know
That
that
was so important.
my friends that have lost children to cancer and drowning, I remember being with them when they during their mourning process, and they would look at me and say, we have to keep him still alive. Please still talk to him about, unfortunately, I think they're all boys that, all my friends had boys that they lost, but they would say to me, please, can we still talk about him? And I said, we can talk about him forever. Like because I think that's another thing people do. They don't talk about that subject. So Erica, I would wonder with you, like, do people just avoid talking about your sons, that passed?
Completely.
Like, yeah. And how does that make you feel as someone that has lost 2 sons?
Well, one of the things that I want people to understand is, they say, oh, well, I didn't want to make you feel bad. I already feel bad.
Yeah.
But letting me talk about the boys is making me feel better, because you get to remember Austin was the kookiest, quirkiest 10-year-old ever. I could keep you here for hours telling you story after story about all that he did in that short little 10 years. I mean, and we love to laugh about silly things. And Donovan, we call him Pretty Committee. He was beautiful, but he didn't have a lot going on. He was trying to ride on this right here. So
it was working for him.
He should have been a blonde. But yeah, they were amazing gifts that I was given, and I love to talk about them. So for people who feel like, oh, I don't want to say anything because I didn't want to make you feel bad, we already feel bad. So let's just talk about it, because then that gives us a little bit of comfort.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
One of the things that happened with us is that right after Lewis and my brother came back from the lake, Lewis immediately started talking about Austin. That set the tone for our family. And I think it also set the tone for our healing. Because think about this, if all the people had come back from the lake and didn't say his name, we would have followed suit and no one would have said his name. And to this day and for forever, I'm ever grateful to my brother-in-law, who's like, that is my son and we will talk about him. Because some of family traditions are we don't speak ill will of the dead. And so people, they take that to mean don't say their name ever again.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that would be like.
No.
And is for people. Yeah.
No. Ladies, I love you both. This was so great. So needed. The world needs your messages, lots of messages you ladies have. So thank you. Thank you for today. Where can people find you?
We both do that pause.
Wow, that was a long pause.
Yeah, lots of places. We have our website, healingstartswiththeheart.com.
Healingstartswiththeheart.com. We'll put all this in the show notes, everybody. Go ahead.
Our Facebook page is Sharon Brubaker at Healing Starts with the Heart. And we have a private Facebook group, Sharon Brubaker, Hope, Heal, Recover. We have our podcast, which is Healing Starts with the Heart. And I think that's about it. We have our email.
On our
at Healing Starts with the Heart.
We have a book. There's a book. Let's talk about the book.
We have a couple of books. They can go onto our website and download the Griever's Guide, which is really everything we talked about right now in writing. It really will help them out. We also have Hope He'll Recover with Sharon and Erica. So that is a book about Austin and Donovan, which is really kind of cool. So yeah,
I love
the
that.
website will lead them to everything that they need.
Yes.
And you guys have groups and things like that, which is very cool. Thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing in the world. I am really, it hits my heart big time. You guys, thank you for everything you're doing. Really love you both. All right. So that's all we've got today. I really love you both. And thank you again for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.